They pulled him from his vehicle, slapped bogus charges on him, until he revealed his true identity. Late one night in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the streets were mostly deserted, save for traffic lights lazily switching from red to green. Jamal Winslow, a veteran assistant U.S. attorney, had just wrapped up dinner with fellow prosecutors. His thoughts weren't on work, injustice, or legal briefs. He just wanted to get home. That changed when flashing red and blue lights appeared in his rear-view mirror. With a sigh, he used his signal, eased to the side, and reached for his wallet. He hadn't been speeding or run any signals. There was no reason for a traffic stop, but he knew better than to expect logic had anything to do with it. Two officers approached the vehicle. Officer Kyle Driscoll, all broad and sporting a tight military cut, came to the driver's side. His partner, Officer Brent Kessler, thinner but equally intimidating, hovered near the passenger door. "License and registration," Driscoll demanded, his voice sharp. Jamal handed over the documents. "Mind telling me why I'm being stopped?" Driscoll shot a quick look to Kessler before responding, "Your tail lights out." Jamal frowned. He knew that was false. His car had cleared inspection recently, and the rear view showed both brake lights working. "Are you certain?" Jamal asked, voice calm. Driscoll's face shifted subtly. He leaned in closer. "Step out of the car, sir." A slow, cold tension spread through Jamal's body. He'd prosecuted too many of these cases, routine stops gone wrong. His instincts said cooperate. His legal training told him the officers were already escalating. "I'm not stepping out until you explain the reason," he said. Kessler gave a smug smile, resting his hand on his utility belt. "Because we told you to." Jamal inhaled slowly. He knew the law. Years spent learning it, upholding it, defending it. He wasn't obligated to exit the vehicle without cause. "I'm within my rights to request justification for leaving the car." Driscoll's temper flared. He jerked the door open, out, now. Before Jamal could respond, Driscoll grabbed his wrist and yanked the seatbelt, tightening painfully across his chest. Digging his fingers into Jamal's shoulder, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jamal snapped, instinctively pulling away. Driscoll didn't answer. He just tightened his grip. Within moments, Kessler was at the passenger side, grabbing Jamal's other arm and twisting it behind his back. Cold metal cuffs bit into his wrists. "You're resisting," Driscoll said with icy detachment. Jamal stared, stunned, as Kessler slammed him against the hood of his own car. His pulse thundered, not from fear, but fury. This wasn't about law or safety. It was a trap, and they believed they'd already won. They were wrong, dead wrong. Inside East Baton Rouge Parish Courthouse, the courtroom buzzed. Clerks shuffled paperwork. Someone coughed, murmured voices filled the room. But beneath the surface, a deeper tension simmered. Jamal Winslow sat rigid at the defense table, composed but not calm. He wasn't here in his usual role as a federal prosecutor. Today, he was the accused. The charges: resisting arrest, obstructing justice, disorderly conduct, all of it made up. Still, Jamal knew that the truth was secondary to what could be proven. At the bench sat Judge Margaret Holloway. In her 60s, she radiated a stern authority. Whether she earned it or not, it was there. Known for her no-nonsense approach, she rarely entertained delays or doubts. From her lack of eye contact, Jamal could already guess how she'd lean. The district attorney, Richard Calloway, moved confidently, as if the outcome was already guaranteed. He adjusted his tie and nodded to the two officers, Driscoll and Kessler, now seated at the witness stand with smug expressions. "Your Honor," Calloway began, "this case is straightforward. A routine stop turned into an unnecessary confrontation, all because the defendant escalated. Jamal inhaled deeply the arrogance, the boldness of the lie." Calloway kept reading from his notes. The defendant failed to obey lawful commands. He acted belligerently and had to be restrained for everyone's safety. At that, Jamal's defense attorney, Thomas Rivera, leapt up. Tired, underpaid, and worn thin, Rivera still found his voice. Objection. He said, voice rising, there is no evidence, none, that my client acted aggressively. Judge Holloway dismissed the objection with a flick of her hand. Overruled. Jamal tightened his jaw. That didn't take long. Rivera let out a quiet breath, then pushed on. Your Honor, these officers escalated the encounter without valid cause. There is no body camera footage of my client behaving aggressively because no such behavior took place. Calloway smirked. The body cams were not functioning at the time of arrest. However, the officers' statements provide ample evidence. Jamal nearly laughed at the absurdity. Their word alone was apparently enough. How convenient! Driscoll was the first to testify, confidently delivering his carefully prepared narrative. The individual was uncooperative from the outset. He said smoothly. He refused to exit the vehicle, raised his voice, and turned the situation hostile. Every word was a lie. Kessler followed, nodding as he echoed the story. He tensed up. We were concerned for our safety. We had no option but to detain him. More fabrication. Under the table, Jamal's fists clenched. He had built his career fighting this exact brand of injustice, and now he was living through it. Judge Holloway glanced toward Rivera with thinly veiled impatience. Anything else, Mr. Rivera? Rivera paused. He knew this judge. He was aware of her record. She didn't care about impartiality, but he swallowed his doubt and continued. Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Jamal Winslow to the stand. This was the moment. As Jamal stood and walked to the witness box, he could feel every gaze on him, assessing, doubting, waiting for him to falter. But he wouldn't. What was coming would change the narrative. He sat, taking a steady breath as the court clerk administered the oath. His hands rested calmly in his lap, though inside, anger burned. He wasn't here just to defend himself. He was here to reveal the truth. Prosecutor Calloway stepped forward, pacing with theatrical ease. Mr. Winslow, would you say you followed the officer's instructions during your traffic stop? Jamal held his gaze, steady and composed. I asked why I was being told to exit my vehicle. That's not against the law. Calloway let out a performative sigh. So you refused to exit the vehicle, correct? I asked why I was being told to step out. Jamal said again, which I'm legally allowed to do. Calloway smirked, shooting a glance at the jury as if Jamal's knowledge of the law was somehow bothersome. And after being given multiple commands, you still didn't comply. Jamal met his gaze steady. Because there wasn't a legitimate reason to. Calloway turned back toward the judge, shaking his head like this was exactly what he'd anticipated. Your Honor, the defendant, Jamal leaned forward, his voice composed. Before we proceed, I think I should reveal something. The room fell silent. Calloway paused. Even Judge Holloway finally looked at him. Really looked. Jamal reached into his briefcase. Rivera, his attorney, stiffened, clearly unsure what was happening. Jamal slowly removed a badge, a small, unassuming rectangle that instantly became the most powerful object in the courtroom. My name is Jamal Winslow, he said, his voice slicing through the stillness, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District. The entire room seemed to freeze. Judge Holloway's lips parted slightly, her gavel suspended in the air but unmoved. The officers tensed. Kessler's leg jittered beneath the table. Driscoll clenched his jaw. Calloway's face drained of color. Excuse me. Jamal tilted his head. Did I mumble? The atmosphere shifted. Jurors leaned forward. The stenographer stopped mid. Keystroke. Even Rivera, his own lawyer, looked like he'd been struck by lightning. You're a federal prosecutor. Calloway's voice trembled slightly. Jamal held up his ID. That's what this says, doesn't it? And just like that, the entire case crumbled. Judge Holloway leaned back, her mouth pressing into a tight line. She knew that if she ruled against Jamal now, if she ignored his testimony and backed the officers, this wouldn't be some routine case. It would blow up into a national headline. The courtroom had become more than just a place for justice. It was now a ticking time bomb, and Jamal had just struck the match. Not a breath could be heard. Judge Holloway's hand clenched around the gavel. Yet she didn't bring the gavel down, not right away. Her mind was racing, calculating the fallout. This wasn't an ordinary courtroom drama anymore, it was a potential career. Ender waiting to explode. Calloway cleared his throat, the confidence that once coated his words vanished. He glanced at the two officers, and for the first time, Driscoll and Kessler seemed genuinely uneasy. Jamal remained seated, watching the quiet scramble unfold. He'd seen it countless times in conference rooms, behind closed office doors, and during own discussions between prosecutors when an inconvenient case threatened to derail everything. Only this time, he was the one flipping the table. I didn't have that information," Calloway muttered, rifling through his paperwork like a man searching for a lifeline. "Your Honor, Judge Holloway raised her hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. Her eyes fixed on Jamal, and now his presence alone held weight. A federal prosecutor falsely arrested, roughed up, lied about. Had it gone unnoticed, he could have ended up just another forgotten name, lost in a broken system. And she understood that. She turned her gaze to the officers, Driscoll, Kessler. Both men straightened in their chairs like schoolboys awaiting discipline. "Would either of you care to revise your statements?" Silence. A crack in the mask. Jamal saw it. The unraveling. Driscoll's hand curled tightly against his knee. Kessler looked to Calloway, eyes pleading for an out. Jamal leaned in slightly. "Before they respond, Your Honor, I'd like to request the court retrieve the dispatch call records from the evening of my arrest." Calloway visibly tensed. Jamal wasn't fishing. He already knew. If a call had gone out before the traffic stop, the excuse about the taillight would fall apart. If no such record existed, then the officers had broken protocol from the start. Judge Holloway examined him, clearly weighing her options. To deny the request meant covering up evidence. To approve it meant handing Jamal the final, damning proof. She cleared her throat. Motion granted. Driscoll exhaled audibly, his composure giving way. Kessler shifted in his seat, his jaw clenching tight. They knew exactly what this meant, and Jamal, leaning back in his chair, was far from finished. This case was never going to stay confined to one courtroom. It began with a lone journalist seated at the back, a young reporter from the Baton Rouge Advocate, typing rapidly on her laptop. Within a few hours, the news began to circulate. By the following morning, Jamal's name was everywhere. Assistant U.S. Attorney falsely detained by Baton Rouge police. Federal prosecutor calls out corrupt cops during live trial. Judge accused of bias after mishandling black defendant, who turned out to be a federal attorney. The internet exploded. Social media platforms flooded with videos from inside the courtroom captured by attendees. The clip where Jamal held up his badge spread like wildfire online. News outlets picked up the story, broadcasting debates on what the trial exposed how many others, like Jamal, had been targeted but lacked the resources or position to fight back. But the most profound reaction was in Baton Rouge itself. Local activists began organizing. Crowds formed outside the courthouse calling for justice and reform. Civil rights lawyers started combing through past rulings made by Judge Holloway, searching for patterns of racial prejudice. Then the situation escalated. A leaked trove of internal police documents surfaced anonymously, emails between officers, exchanges revealing tactics to justify dubious stops, testimonies from other black motorists who reported being pulled over, cited falsely, and threatened when they challenged the accusations. It wasn't just Jamal Winslow's case anymore. It had become a spotlight on a long-standing system operating unchecked. And now, everything was exposed. Still, the establishment resisted. Pushback came swiftly. City officials scrambled for cover. The police department released a bland, calculated statement. Judge Holloway's office went silent, refusing to comment or return inquiries. By the week's end, the Baton Rouge Police Department declared they had opened an internal investigation, a hollow gesture Jamal recognized well. He'd seen this before, a surface-level move meant to calm the public without creating meaningful reform. But this time, the people weren't satisfied. Momentum kept growing. A prominent civil rights attorney filed a federal lawsuit representing past victims of these same abuses. Local leaders called for Judge Holloway's removal from the bench. Protesters stood their ground, refusing to be silenced. Then came the turning point. The case was officially transferred to the Louisiana Attorney General for further examination. Jamal watched it all unfold from his apartment, eyes fixed on the press conference. His phone buzzed non-stop messages from reporters, attorneys, and people who had faced the same kind of treatment he had, but hadn't carried the same kind of authority to defend themselves. This was no longer about saving face. The cracks in the system were widening, and they were running out of places to hide. And Judge Holloway, she felt the shift. When Jamal walked into the courtroom for the verdict, her demeanor had shifted. Gone was the detached expression, the quiet superiority. She sat facing a case too massive to dismiss, knowing she had to choose protect a broken system or stand with the truth. But would she choose justice, or play it safe and shield the very machinery that had failed? The room was hushed. Judge Holloway cleared her throat, her expression strained under the weight of the past few weeks, the demonstrations, relentless media coverage, and damaging leaks. She no longer had an easy way out. Glancing at her notes, she seemed more burdened than certain. Everyone in the courtroom knew this ruling wasn't entirely in her hands anymore. The public had taken hold of it. She exhaled, gently placing the gavel down. After reviewing the evidence, she began, "The court finds the defendant." There was a pause, brief, but it carried the weight of everything. Not guilty. Relief surged through Jamal like a wave, but he remained still, composed. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been silenced or wrongly accused. The officers remained frozen, their faces pale. Kessler's hands were balled into fists, his career unraveling in real time. Driscoll, who had always carried himself with smug confidence, leaned forward. "Your Honor, Judge Holloway raised a hand, cutting him off. This court will be submitting all relevant documents to the state attorney's office for additional investigation." That was the moment. There would be no quiet dismissal this time. The officers weren't walking out untouched. The courtroom stirred a low hum of reactions, the frantic tapping of reporters' keyboards. For once, the spotlight wasn't on the accused, it was on those who had been protected for too long. For the first time, the system was being forced to look inward. Jamal rose to his feet slowly. His attorney gave him a reassuring pat on the back. But his attention stayed on the officers, on Prosecutor Calloway, who looked like everything he'd built had crumbled, on the judge who had ignored cases like this for years until she had no other choice. But more than anyone, he thought about those who weren't present, the ones who had once sat in this seat and didn't get a second chance. As Jamal stepped outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted, applause erupted, but he didn't feel triumphant, because this wasn't a win. It was confirmation of what had always been true, but was only addressed now because it was in plain view, and he understood the fight wasn't finished, not for him, and not for those still caught in it. He moved through the crowd, past the lights and noise, toward voices demanding lasting reform, because one ruling wouldn't fix everything, but this time, no one was turning away. If this story stirred something in you even briefly, then ask yourself how many more of these stories go untold. How many lives are changed forever without ever getting their day in court, without headlines, without anyone listening? It's not enough to recognize injustice, we have to confront it. So if you believe real justice means accountability for those in power, then speak up. Share this message, have the conversation, stay alert, because the more eyes that stay open, the harder it becomes for these truths to be buried, and that's how real change takes root.